Hi, it's Clark on Temptress. Today I'm going to give you my review of the Epoch 300 amp hour dual purpose battery. Is this a good one? Is it worth the money? Let's find out. The guys at Epoch sent me this battery and asked for my opinion on it. Spent some time with it. Has been on my bench for a while, actually. Let's dive in. Let's find out what it is. Well, it has 300 amp hours. That's a lot of power. That's a good amount for many people, and double that is a tremendous amount. A lot of people want two batteries of equal type and size so that if one were to go bad, they got the other one. And, this is about the right size for a lot of that. It can put out a lot of current. The numbers are 300 amps continuous, and that's a lot. 1,000 amps for just a few seconds, and 800 amps for, it must have been like 10 seconds. I don't remember right now. Those are for cranking an engine. And that would be plenty to crank my diesel. I think it would be plenty to start most any engine. Problem is, don't do that. I think having those big numbers could be really great to use it up as a bow thruster, or if you had a tremendously big inverter load, excellent. That pulse that an induction motor, like maybe an air conditioner requires, this guy's going to be able to do it without the voltage going down so bad, or at least without it shutting off. Let's put it that way. But, and I kind of said it was okay to start an outboard with the Li Time, which turned out to be one of the worst batteries I've ever reviewed once I lived with it for a while. I really wish I wouldn't have said that. I'm back now to the idea, never start an engine with anything but lead. Full stop, period, no other answers allowed. Two reasons for that. One, lead is really great at those big pulses. Yeah, this guy can do it too, but look what you have to buy. All of this battery, where you could get those kind of numbers out of a little lead like this big that would cost like 200 bucks. But most importantly, lithium, to be lithium and be safe, has to have a BMS that can shut down the battery, at least in a don't charge me anymore, I got problems going on way. If a battery didn't have that feature, no matter what they're trying to do, if it didn't have that feature, you don't want it around you because it could get into thermal runaway, unlikely with lithium iron phosphate, but it could destroy itself. So at the very least, the cheapest, crappiest, Chinese, I won't review it, horrible battery, all of them have a BMS that will shut down if the voltage goes too high on the cell. And you say, well, I won't charge it that high. You can't say that because the cells can get out of balance. And if they get out of balance, one cell will go high while all the others are low. So from the outside, it looks like, oh, that battery's got lots of room in it. That's why balance is so important. And let me just say this, if you have batteries that you haven't balanced yourself, when you get a new battery, it's vital you balance them. I have a video on it, what to do with a new lithium battery. Not balancing your batteries like running your engine without changing the oil. You wouldn't do that. You shouldn't do this. It damages the batteries. But back to this guy, or any lithium battery. If they get out of whack, the average could be a fairly low voltage, but one cell is too high, and it disconnects its ability to absorb power. Well, if you have an alternator that's spinning, putting out a bunch of power, you suddenly remove that reservoir that it's filling, the voltage can sky up before any of the control units have time to slow it down, and it could pop the diodes, and now you don't have an alternator anymore. For outboard motors, they usually are better with that because they kind of live in a world where someone could disconnect the battery. But I know one in particular, very popular and good quality outboard, the Yamaha. If you disconnect its battery, like this guy disconnects itself electronically, the motor will shut down like right away. And if you were like going fast, going on a rock, about to turn, expecting that thrust to spin your back end around and it died, well, that's not good. And where are there rocks? Well, right when you leave a marina. So you could have your battery fully charged because it's been like on a charger. You start the engine, you take down the littlest amount, you go out, and the engine's making electricity. It's making a lot of electricity. This thing shuts itself off, and you just ran into the rocks. For lots and lots of reasons, let's just stop with, we only use lead to start engines. If you want to mix your lead and lithium, I have the bank manager approach. If they're itty-bitty batteries, this one isn't, or cheap batteries, oh my God, epochs are not cheap. You might not want to use the bank manager because, you know, it costs a bunch. But if you're going to build a system that you need it to be reliable and everything, look at my bank manager stuff. Go to Marine DCAC, and everything you need to know is there presented well. Enough of the commercial. Okay, what came in the case actually as I bought it, I'm not sure if you'll get all these things. I'm sure you'll get this. This is a little jumper wire that uses these data link outs so you can connect a daisy chain of batteries. Cool. It has a manual. It's a little Chinglishy, but it's understandable. It's okay. Manuals are good. Now, I'm unclear whether everybody gets this or I got this, but I got this control panel sent to me, and when it's hooked up, it gives you lots of battery information, and you know, it did make my life a little easier while I was balancing this guy. We'll get to balance later. Let's hook it up. We've got a data line, and we have to give it power independently. So the battery's perfectly good for that. And on it comes. Okay, I'll try not to wiggle that because I didn't put it in that well. So what do we have? Go to detail, choose the battery. It thinks it's 100% charged, which it is. The voltage is 13.31. No current, which is what we know. It gives you an amp hour count. I'll get back to that. The temperature, the power going in and out in watts, and how many cycles it's seen. It's seen one full cycle. I did one full cycle verifying how many amp hours it had. Let me just hold this up here so you can see that screen. And let me go to the main screen, which is very, very similar. It tells you the configuration, but other than that, it's kind of the same stuff. What doesn't it tell you? It doesn't tell you the intercell voltages. I would love to know what the cell voltage. I'd at least like to know what is the delta between the lowest cell and the highest cell. But, you know, they don't tell you here. So, well, that's sad. You know, day to day, what do you really need to know? What amps are going in and out? What's the voltage? Tells you most all of it. If you want more information, you have to go to the app. There's two different apps that Epoch puts out. Epoch Pro and Epoch Li Ion. This uses the Pro. And you choose a battery, and I only have one that is this type here. And we get a very similar screen. I mean, very similar style, except this gives us a little more information. If I go to details, I can get the cell voltage and indicators for what protection mode it may be in at the time. The cell voltages are great, but personally, I would like to see it do the math for me so I don't have to do all the subtraction. But I'd like to, at the very least, be shown the difference between the top cell and the bottom cell. What neither of these does is tell you when the battery is balancing. I don't think this is too much to ask because you're going to have to balance this thing. It's going to be your responsibility. And, you know, you don't know if you're doing the right thing. It took me 3 days to get this balanced. When it arrived, it was wildly out of balance. And I'm trying to balance it using the closed case method everybody would use. And I didn't know if I was making way or not. You know, the method I used turned out to be the one that I have in the video. But it's such a big battery with such big cells. And they use, obviously, a passive slow balancer, maybe 100 milliamps. It took days and days and days of holding it up at high voltage, which I hate to do because holding batteries up at high voltage is not good for them. And I would like to minimize that. So I contacted Epoch. And I asked a question that I didn't think was too risque. I asked, could you give me the logic to how your guy balances, when it's balancing or not? Because your app doesn't tell me. It could. No, trade secret. Can't tell you. It's not a trade secret. Come on. You know, it's either balancing or it's not. If I really wanted to figure out the trade secret, I'd pop it up, put an amp meter on the things, see when it's balancing and figure it out. That's a lot of work. The point is, this is something that we need to do. And honestly, at $1,499, we shouldn't have to balance these batteries. They should come to us balanced, at least initially. They can maybe be rebalanced in time, but when I open that box and I've spent over $1,000, I expect them to put the effort into it to balance it. This one was 0.3 volts out of balance between the top and the bottom cell, and that's just like a lot. I mean, that's almost as much as I've ever seen ever. So, okay, bad on them for not, giving us a pre-balanced cell at that kind of price. We're paying, it's probably the most expensive line of batteries I've ever seen. But gee, tell us, at least preferably with an update to your app, but at least give us the logic so that we know when it's balancing and when it's not balancing, so we can get it balanced as expeditiously as possible. So I'm not too happy about that, as you might be able to tell. But back to the battery itself. This is a really cool battery. Well, let's go to what's on top. It has this metal plate. That metal plate means to me that inside this battery has a BMS, like anybody does, and BMSs aren't perfect transmitters of power. Their MOSFETs have some resistance, and when you run a lot of power through them, they're going to get warm, and that heat has to go somewhere. So not only do they have a heat sink, inside the case, apparently they have brought it outside the case, so some connection to this piece of metal. One good thing about that is it gets rid of the heat faster because it's outside of the somewhat insulating plastic case. Another thing is you can touch it, you can say, no, it's not hot at all. So you can know the temperature state without looking at the app or the monitor here. It has lots of terminals. I gotta say I like that. There's 2 positives and 2 negatives. If you're hooking up a lot of big wires, stacking them can be problematic. Going to a bus bar to do that works, but that's just more terminals. Every terminal, every connection is costing you some extra resistance. So having 2 is, way better than having 1. You could put a big lug here and a different big lug here that might go to the next battery, whatever you need. It has a small display here. This display tells you percentage charge just as in 1, 2, 3, 4 quarters. It does have a button, and the button is really important. When you hold that down for a bit, it's going to let the battery look at its world, like if there were other data lines and batteries connected, and figure out what's going on. And it needs to do that before it will talk to its app. So just know you have to do that. You hold it down for an amount of time. It's in the manual. Let go. Has a switch. External switch. I like batteries with external switches. Most batteries don't have it, but with an external switch, I can hit this and 2 good things happen. The battery no longer has charged pins. So, if I wanted to throw this around in a metal box, turn that off, it's pretty safe. Second off, if I'm going to put this in storage, the BMS is constantly drawing some power. And you turn this off, and I bet you it's still drawing a teeny bit of power, but it should be almost nothing. So I like that. I think the switch is waterproof, not this boot, because the boot does have vents and such. I think the boot's there so you won't bump it, but I don't know that for a fact. We got our data lines. The link in is what goes to the monitor, seen backwards to me. The link out is where another link in would come in from the next battery. It could be they're identical. Very often these type of communications are, but I didn't test that, and just do it right. Works. We got handles, straps that are adequate for the weight, and they come right off to get it out of the way. I don't see any way of mounting it with like threaded, inserts or anything. You'd have to strap this one down, but that's valid. Let's see what else. Vent and lots of little plugs that cover screws, and we're about to hit that. Take a look at what's inside. I did run this battery after I did the balance through a discharge through my little calibrated amp hour counter, and I got 306 amp hours. It's a 300 amp hour battery, so slightly more than we paid for, which is what we would expect, so good on them for that. I guess the next thing to do is open it up and see what's inside. So let me remove my monitor. Make sure I got my watch off. No metal on you when you go inside. Remember, these things can put out tremendous amounts of power. You saw the 1,000 number and the 800 amp number. That's through the BMS. We're going to go in where we could jump past the BMS. These batteries can put out more than that. So you just be really careful if you ever open one of these up. If you're not afraid, don't do it. You're a fool. Okay, I got these little plugs. I'll pop these out. What am I going to need? Looks like an Allen wrench. Whew, that's a lot of screws in this case. Probably took me longer than some of the ones I had to take off with a hammer and a chisel. But it'll go right back on, and that's what's good. Okay, this should be a seal with let me turn off the pulls. Should be a seal here. And yep, there's a rubber seal. Oh, they put the BMS on the lid. I like that. And look, the heatsink is that top metal plate, so I like that a lot. Let me just give a second to look around in here. I think there's some good support in a way you don't normally see. The cells are squeezed together. That's good. Usually for the budget batteries, they just wrap some like fiberglass strapping around them. And when the cells start to outgas, they can like swell up. And I understand that if you hold them into shape and let the pressure build inside them, it's better for the battery. I assume that the gases go back where they belong at that higher pressure. Anyway, there is some structure in here that should help that, keep that from happening. I don't know why, but there's a load of little fuses. And they look like fuses, and they say F and a number. So I think they are fuses. So apparently they're fusing for powers that are just plain too high. That's not a bad thing. I mean, of course, if the fuses blow, you're gonna have to open up the case to repair it. But, you know, if safety is your number one thing, let me tell you from an electrical engineering point of view, just some insight. The switching that turns off this pull, you know, to shut off the battery, the BMS's control over the world, that's with something called a MOSFET. And MOSFETs, when they fail, very often they fail on. So you could get in a situation where the BMS just can't shut down the MOSFETs, or even, let's say, the BMS little microprocessor fails, has a software error, and you know, crashes. Were that to happen, and you drew too much power, and you didn't provide external fusing, well, having fuses in the case could stop a fire from happening. So good on them. Good on them for that. This board over here looks like it's more than just the radio. I think this is the microprocessor. I can look up that chip, but based on the number of pins, there's no question that's the microprocessor. So this is just like a switching device. Well, it looks nice. Looks nice in here. Let's get an inverter on it and pull some power. I'm really only set up to pull 1,500 watts, which is like half of what this thing's supposed to put out. But we'll look with the thermal cameras. I'm not too concerned with this thing getting hot inside. They've got 6 wires of 6 gauge. That's a lot of wire. And then on the going to the outside terminals, they've got great big bus bars. Same with the positive side. I feel that there's 3 in each of these. I'm sure they're also 6 gauge. So, you know, they didn't skimp. Oh, while we're in here, we got these wires, and they're going to this heater. So this is one of the batteries that not only, if it gets too cold, will it say, hey, stop charging me, it'll actually divert that power into the heater and warm the battery up. If you have a camper and you put one of these in here, the thing about campers, they're mobile. You really don't know how you're going to use them. You could say, I only go to Arizona, it never freezes. Well, maybe someday you won't, and you might forget by then. And if you went like up into the mountains, visited friends, you don't have your furnace on, the batteries can get cold, the solar panel comes out, bang, you've just destroyed your expensive batteries. So this not only will not let the batteries take power when they're cold, but it will divert that power from the solar panel to warm up the batteries quicker with that heater. And then as soon as they're warm enough, it'll say, yeah, I'd like that power, please. I've been burning power all night. So there we go. Okay, let me go off camera and set up my inverter and get my heat gun and my thermal camera, and we'll see what we see. Well, it's been 15 minutes. I did get a little smarter. I've done a few of these reviews, but never in the real heat of the summer yet. I got some lights. They're LED. They put in a little heat. But my God, this heat gun was in the room with me, and this room got hot. So I got a heavy duty extension cord and put the heat gun out on the porch. Quieter and a lot less heat. Anyway, things been putting out about 125 amps, which isn't a huge amount for this battery, you know, a little less than half. But heat will form where heat's going to form. It just won't be as much of it. Let's see what we do have. Let me start the camera so y'all can watch with me. The hottest thing here is this wire at 97 degrees. That's like, I can feel that it's warm. I mean, it's cooler than my body temperature. Take a look at my camera. That is 136. My light, you know, this is not a problem. And I checked it halfway through. It really was like 195 10 minutes ago. That's it. It's not going to get hot. I think that they've done a stellar job inside. I also like that they use mechanical fasteners, metal hold downs. They're screwed down to the case. Almost every other manufacturer shoves foam in with a little sticky tape on it. Let's just say this is not going anywhere. So above and beyond, which is what we expect for this price range. Let's go down the leaderboard things. For a capacity, I'll give it a great. It's over 300 amp hours. What more can we ask, right? We're paying for 300. The cells are excellent. I don't remember what they are now. I did look them up, and you know, they didn't skimp. The build quality, great. But I'm not going to give it an excellent because, well, you know, I expect excellent for this money, and they didn't balance the cells. I think they need to balance the cells, and they should at least tell us when it is balancing the cells so that we can do it ourselves. Case, absolutely excellent. I mean, it has a lot of screws in it, and that's great because, you know, things can warp, and lots of small fasteners are the best way to do something like this. The only problem is I had to take it apart. So, you know, that's on me, not on you. You're very unlikely to ever have to take this apart. The company, well, you know, it's a great company. For everything I know, they stand behind their stuff. They had put in a feature in their earlier batteries where they would stop the charge if they felt that you were abusing the battery at low voltage, the low current overcharge thing. And they realized they weren't doing it right. A lot of people pointed it out to them and made web pages to how to work around the problem that they had caused. But in realizing they weren't doing it right, they did the right thing. They took that feature out. If you want to protect the batteries and get really long life, the bank manager is the way to do that. It works great. To you guys at the battery companies, any of you want to be able to put a sticker on it that says Bank Manager inside, we can talk about putting my logic into your BMS, or maybe I'll just make you a BMS if that's what you want. And you'll have the only battery in town that can do that. And I tell you, there's a lot of sales available in industry that will jump on that. But that's from me to the battery manufacturers. I don't like that the company wouldn't tell me the logic of balance. That just bugs me. I wanted to pass it on to you so I could tell you the quickest, easiest, least destructive to the cells way of balancing them. And they said, no, trade secret. And, you know, it isn't. Finally, cost to value. Good. It's really hard to rate that on a battery that's at the extreme. You know, if I found a really cheap battery that did everything I wanted to do, that's easy. Excellent. If I found a piece of crap battery that cost a lot, again, poor, easy. This has to go in the middle, because if you don't have the budget for this battery, it doesn't matter. You're not going to buy it anyway. If you have the budget for this battery, they do a fine job. It's a great battery. So it more has to do with you than the actual battery. For the right person, this is a good choice. Anyway, that's my review of the Epoch Dual Purpose 300 amp hour 12 volt battery. Bye from Clark on Temptress. Hope you all have a great day.